In this video, I made a kind of like a panel clamp. I got this inspiration from Bourbon Moth, and so all the description is down in the link, along with the tools I used. So if you're interested, take a follow along and hit the subscribe notification as well, so you can see this is it's poplar on both sides, and it's support so that you can clamp the panel down, and then you would put this down and turn both sides and be able to keep it smooth so you don't have to bulging in there. So I start off with some poplar here. I just got from Home Depot, but so I'm going to be straightening it out with a planer, but you can be, or sorry, a jointer, but you can be using a table saw, anything like that. So it was about 7 feet. So I cut it in half. So that's why I wanted to have just about 3 feet, because that's about any panel is usually in the 20 inches or so that I make. And so just draw a straight line across it. Like I said, I found the midpoint so I could take it and roughly get, maximize the amount. And once I got it, just cut it. Here doesn't have to be too precise. Normally I do this on a miter saw or something, but just happen to have the track saw because I'm going to be, cutting the final piece down, and avoid kickback like I just did like that. So it's probably a safer way to do this. So now I'm just straightening out the edge. Like I said, I just used to get a straight line just so I could have a straight piece. Because obviously, if you're gluing pieces down, you want to have a nice straight a line, so that because it's the goal of this clamp. So I'm doing both of them. So there's a top and a bottom, and they're going to be glued together. So there's 8 pieces in total that I had to do here, because I wanted to be able to do both ends of the board, and top and bottom. And after I got one straight side, then I wanted to cut all of them so they had a pretty equal size cut along that. So I measure the depth I want to cut on there. Then I'm going to measure the width of it. And then what I want to do again is just keep it to one width. So I made sure it was all going to handle that, and then just run all of the boards through that so that I have a nice even width for each one of them. So again, I'm going to be, because I'm going to be gluing 2 of these together, and then what I wanted to do was make it thicker, so give it a little extra support so that it's not bending as you're clamping down. So again, obviously, exciting sawing here, just passing all the pieces through here. Again, just each one, and just make sure that they're all the same width, just to kind of reduce the amount of milling to have to do afterwards as I get each one of these pieces glued together, because again, I'm going to be gluing 2 of these together and then cutting the holes to put the clamp in there so that they can clamp on either end. So speed it up here because you kind of get the idea of what it looks like sawing all these pieces. Begin passed all of them through here, all 8 of them, and they're actually pretty close, but just wanted to make sure that they were exact. And then what I had to do here, just because I should have got the dado saw or dado blade out, but what I'm doing is just dadoing out grooves in the end of each one. And what you'll see is I do it in each side, and I should have do it over and over again. It was a pain. So it would have been a lot quicker with a dado saw. What I'm doing is dadoing now, and then when you glue it together, each one of the halves glued, there's a hole there, and then the clamp goes through that portion of the hole. And you can see here, this is what I mean. So both sides dadoed out, both sides and on each end, and they put it together. It's just enough that the clamp goes through that. So this is this testing. I want to test it out. Just dry fit it first to make sure it works. So you can see how it goes through that like that. And then it's on each end that way so that you can clamp to the end of the board. So just glue it together as in like any other panel. This isn't really, it doesn't have to have, be perfect like you would with some other panels where you're trying to avoid any gaps. It's just enough that it's going to stick together. And these things have so much surface grain that's crossing it that there was no problem. And I think I ended up making it about 3 inches in height, and then it doubled over. So it was going to be plenty rigid to support the panels on each side. Again, it's clamping down. So just took it, put in these parallel clamps. I ended up putting all of them together, but just trying it out here first. So on the ends, just to make sure the ends and then get a clamp in the middle as well, just trying to tighten it down. And I tried to avoid putting too much glue in there, just wanted enough to put it together. So on the bottom's enough, maybe even did overkill here for the needed, and just some of the clamps on the top, just make sure I have them in equal pressure so that I'm not, you're not clamping it so much from one side that you're adding a twist. It's probably not going to happen with these parallel clamps, but it was good enough. And so I took each one of them and put in between. So obviously then they're not glued in between each other, but this is a way I could glue all 4 of them at the same time without having to wait. And you can see as I just left them overnight just to make sure I had a good glue up on them. And then you'll see that the individual pieces are glued together here, but they're not, each of the panel clamps are not glued to each other, which is good. I didn't want, that's obviously what I didn't want to happen, but there wasn't enough glue to go in between them. So you see I have 4 pieces here. So now 2 on each end, top and bottom. And like I mentioned, I just got a new tool, this planer jointer. So I wanted to try it out. You could actually use it with a saw. You could run it through with a table saw as well, or any other kind of saw if you want, and doing the same way of getting parallel. But it doesn't have to be perfect either. You just want at least one side to be flat, and then the clamps are going on the top and they're pressing down. But you obviously want the part of the clamp, this panel clamp that's touching the wood or your panel that you're gluing together, you want that to be as straight as possible, because obviously that's the goal of this, is to end up with gluing panels together and have them flat. So you can see I made a couple passes here, get the glue off, end up with a real nice, smooth, straight edge. Again, this was a little bit of overkill, but I was just trying to learn. So I made one side flat, and then as I mentioned, you can just run it through the table saw and make that parallel to the other side. Again, this is not really necessary, but it was just wanted to do that. And then I would just quick trimming the end off. Again, it didn't have to be perfect, so I wouldn't use the little miter gauge on the table saw, but all I wanted to do was just square off the end just to kind of make it look a little bit nicer. And then to put these clamps through, it was easy when they were apart, but there you see there's a little notch on there that's going to keep it from sliding off. So you have to use a grinder, cutter, something like that, get rid of that little notch so that you can pull the end of the clamp off. So there's a little notch on each side. So what I need to do is pull the clamp's head all the way off so that I can then slide that through into the clamp, because obviously it's glued together this time, and be able to slide it through both sides and then reattach it. So you just have to watch out. Those little things are spring loaded on the end, so just try to do it carefully so they don't go shooting off. And I can tell you from experience, if you try to do it fast, it shoots off, and then you got to go find the little clips and a spring. So here's just kind of demoing what it looks like. So for example, in that panel, or those parallel clamps, these 2 panels, pretend like I would be gluing them together. And if I put too much pressure, they may bow. So what I want to do is, with these panel clamps, is to put it in between there and to give it a strong, flat surface. So I would put it in between like that and then tighten down one side. And what I found actually ended up, it was easier, is to run one side all the way as close as possible and then use a clamp on a part like this, closest to the board. And then this way you get a nice parallel surface on both sides. And then to avoid getting any glue or having it glue your wood there, is to use this tuck tape or any kind of tape. Just put it on there along the edge so any spill out is not going to get onto your wood, and then obviously glue your panel too. And so I actually use this, I actually used them on this latest, I was making a desk, and so I was gluing these 3 maple panels together. So I used these panel clamps. I actually used up the halves of it just because of the way I need to do it, but I was just using it to hold down, so you can see. So because I was tightening it really tight, and I didn't want it to buckle or on a nice flat surface, so I used all 4 of them this way, and it worked out really good. I ended up with a flat surface.